Okay, we're going to start live feed for the next one. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We are meeting to consider an application for a premises licence for Canterbury Lane convenience store in Canterbury. And we're just going to follow the agenda as published, hopefully fairly effectively. So, Andrea, do we have any apologies?
No apologies, Chair.
Andrea, do we have any substitutes?
No substitutes.
Andrea, do we have any declarations of interest received in advance?
No declarations received in advance, Chair.
Are there any further declarations?
No, Chair.
No, Chair.
And none from me. And I can say at this point, should our substitute member, Councillor Mackenzie, wish to leave,
He no can.
he is now finally allowed to do so.
Thank you, Chair.
Lightweight.
Okay. Okay, I'm just going to explain that the order of business, which is laid out on page 5 of the agenda, will be followed for this review hearing. And we're on to item 5, which is consideration about granting under the Licensing Act 2003 a premises licence for Canterbury Lane Convenience Store, Canterbury CT1 2HL. So I'm going to ask our licensing officer, Bryony, to introduce the application. So please.
Thank you, Chair. So as you've just mentioned, we have an application for a premises licence under the Licensing Act 2003, and that premises is Canterbury Lane Convenience Store. You've given the address already. The name and address of the applicant is Surya Limited, and that's 141 Station Road, Herne Bay, Kent. The hours that have been applied for are Monday to Sunday, 8:30 a.m. to 11 p.m, and that is opening times and off sales of alcohol. Just a quick summary of the application. So it's to grant a licence for the supply of alcohol for the consumption off the premises. The application does mainly address Section 11 of the licensing policy, which refers to the hours that the premises is open. However, the request to sell alcohol from 8:30 a.m. on a Sunday and until 2300 on a Sunday would be an hour and a half earlier than the recommended start time and 30 minutes later than the preferred core hours for Sundays. There is obviously some information in the report about those core hours that's taken from the policy. I don't need to read it all out now because I'm sure you're familiar with it. And so let me just skip through. We have representations from responsible authorities, and we have an objection from Kent Police and an objection from Trading Standards. We didn't have any representations that were received within the consultation period from other persons. The licensing subcommittee is required to evaluate each representation in accordance with the licensing objectives. And the considerations for the subcommittee must have regard to the application for the Council's Statement of Licensing Policy, the guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003 and any relevant representations, taking such steps as it considers necessary for the promotion of the licensing objectives, and those options are to grant the application with additional or amended times or conditions, or to reject the application. A reminder of the licensing objectives: prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance and protection of children from harm. I won't read out the considerations again. You have the application for the premises licence and the plan at Appendix A. the blue notice and the newspaper advert at Appendix B, and the relevant representations from responsible authorities at Appendix C. And just to remind everybody present that the councillors, the legal representative and the licensing officer did attend the premises this morning at 10:15 to view the premises. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now's the opportunity for the applicant, Mr. Craig, to make the case, make the application.
Thank you, Chair. Look, we were all in the room earlier on. You heard everything that everyone had to say. I don't know, I'm not going to, I think with your leave, I'm not going to keep repeating what was said before. We all know, obviously, this is this applicant is the licence holder at the other premises. So you'll be delighted to hear. I'll be a little bit briefer because I'm not going to insult anyone's intelligence by repeating what was said before. So this is application for the grant of a premises licence. This premises was previously licensed and the licence was revoked. The sale was actually agreed prior to the review application being submitted by Kent Police. I guess that's important because it shows that discussions were in situ before. I think Michael's going to address you on a couple of points because he was involved at that point and I wasn't. But suffice to say, I think you're all aware that obviously this purchase is contingent upon the outcome of these proceedings. So just please, very briefly, to invite you to turn to page 32 in the agenda pack. Sorry, not 32, 31. Obviously, this is the second agenda pack. You have there the hours that are being applied for, as your licensing officer has pointed out. From Monday to Saturday, that's within the core hours provided for in your statement of licensing policy. It does extend beyond that on a Sunday. Obviously, you've got the power to modify those hours if you think that's appropriate. But I'll just make the point, those hours are just simply in accordance with the other days of the week. So it's just basically to provide a level of consistency. You can see below at the bottom of that page, 31, the proposal is the keeping to be the DPS. Again, if you're minded to grant this licence, it's a matter for you, really. You do have the power to exclude him as being the DPS if you think that would be appropriate in these circumstances if you were to grant this licence. It's not unusual for an individual to be a DPS of more than one premises. There's certainly nothing prohibiting it within the Act. The guidance itself says that whoever's the DPS should be the person who has day-to-day control of the premises and thereby, given the relative geographical proximity of the premises, that's not wholly unusual to have two DPSs in those one DPS in two premises in those circumstances. But again, that's a matter for you. I'm just reminding you of your powers, although I know Mr. Key advising I don't need to do that. And please then invite you to turn to page 33, because these are the steps that the applicant is proposing to be effectively converted into conditions on the licence. And what Michael did when he framed this application was obviously take into account what had gone on before. I think it would be fair to say Michael fought the good fight with the review application for these premises, but I am aware of the circumstances and they're significantly more egregious than what was alleged to have occurred at the Herne Bay store. And so these conditions are comprehensive and more far-reaching as a consequence of that than the other premises. So you, as well as the training and CCTV and requirements to record incidents, you've also got ABV condition, single can condition. Turning the page, obviously refusals book, incident book. You've got restrictions in relation to hours of waste collection and deliveries. And then obviously you've also got the Challenge 25 condition. Of course, similar to the last hearing, you have the power to to modify any of those conditions as you think is appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. You've seen the store. It's similar to the other premises. It's small. It's certainly capable of being manned quite comfortably with a single member of staff. I make that point for various reasons, just not least to point out that it should be a relatively easy store to manage. In fact, arguably, it's a bit smaller than the other store. It's probably a bit wider, maybe, but it's certainly nowhere near as as long. So, I mean, obviously, you'll have some questions for us, but I just have some overarching. And I'm sorry, the other thing is that just in terms of the hours, there have been no objections to the hours in the any of the representations that have been made by any responsible authorities, including, I should say, environmental health. They had concerns around nuisance. I think a lot of those hours are what you'd expect from a health licence, frankly, 8:30 in the morning till 11 at night. But I just make these overarching points. First of all, every case is taken on its own merits. And so you're considering this application, but just make the point that this is an experienced licence holder. The Licensing Act is still a permissive regime, and so the default position is, unless there's a good reason to refuse an application, then the path of least resistance, the default position is to grant it. And obviously, I'm going to invite you to consider the steps you've taken in the other hearing, but when considering that, and perhaps most crucially, when you're looking at each case, it's on its own merits, the Section 182 guidance at paragraph 9.43 makes reference to the fact that any decision you make needs to be evidence-based. And obviously, you've got the evidence before you about this applicant, and I would just say, obviously, whatever's gone on at this store previously, it's a trite principle within the licensing regime that because one place has been run very poorly by a previous owner, that doesn't mean that the person who's coming in should have any questions cast upon them. It's about this individual applicant and how they're going to run these premises. And given the fact there are still, I'm bound to say this, given the fact there are still some age-restricted products on sale in those premises, we saw that today. Obviously, you don't presently need a licence for tobacco or vapes. I would submit that this particular applicant is someone who is going to better responsibly run the premises, given how they've demonstrated that they can make improvements to how they've run the other place, than having the current operator in there, who's the person who obviously was responsible for what went on with that sale to a very young individual. So I just make that point as well. So I don't think I need to detain you anymore in terms of it. You've got the application before you. You understand the points. I think, Mikey, you just wanted to make a point, didn't you, about your interaction with the police? Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Duncan. I think the application that's before you today, in effect, really mirrors what the licence, what was in place up until the 26th of February last year. Discussions between Akeep and Mr Gunn started back in December last year for Akeep to buy the store. The police are well aware of those discussions going ahead, and after the hearing on the 26th of February, I did say to Danny, was she aware of the sale, which she was aware, confirmed that, and I said that an application was going to come in for a new licence from Akeep, and Danny indicated that there wouldn't be any objections at that point to the application. Unfortunately, there was the incident that occurred on the 2nd of March. Sat here just listening to Duncan, it did occur to me that it's probably not uncommon if a licence gets revoked that somebody applies for a new one and says, oh, I'm buying the shop, let me have a licence, and then I'll run it, and nothing ever happens with the shop. And I think I'm not really consulting my client on this, but I think he would probably accept a condition on there if you were minded to grant the application, that would probably restrict the former holder of the licence, Mr. Ali Gunn, being involved in the running of that business or being employed. So that, therefore, the premises licence could not be used until the sale went through. I think, it just occurred to me, if you grant the licence today, the licence is in place, what's to stop Mr. Gunn putting alcohol back in there? But I think if you had a condition that said, whilst Mr. Gunn was involved in the business, he couldn't sell alcohol or something to that effect, that would probably give both the licensing subcommittee and the police some comfort in the fact that this isn't just smoke and mirrors and we're trying to get another licence in place just so they can carry on trading. But that's why the application is before you today. Thank you.
Okay, I've got a few questions around this, and I'd like to thank you, Mr. King and Mr. Craig, especially for the last point that you've just made, because it is of natural area of concern for the committee. And I'm very glad that you have faced that up front and said you'd be happy for a particular condition to be in there like that. I think it's fair to say that the applicant is aware of what happened at that convenience store previously, and I'm assuming the applicant's well aware of what the committee's position is and view of what was that previous behaviour. And of course, if there was any repetition of anything like that whatsoever, we wouldn't hesitate in revoking on a further occasion. I'm sure the applicant is aware that that is the case. Okay, that said, another thought does occur to me, Mr. Craig, which is there's a set of licence conditions here we're considering this afternoon for the applicant. Is there a reason why it can't be the same set of licence conditions that we've actually asked for in respect of the last situation we've just heard? Is there a reason why those additional bits couldn't be in there? That's a question I have to ask.
Just to clarify, you're talking in terms of the specific, so for example, the CCTV, is there any reason that what you've put there can't be mirrored here, incident, but no is the answer. There's no reason why that can't happen.
I think in an ideal world, being an operator of two stores, identical conditions on both licenses is the ideal, mainly because if staff are moving from one shop to another, there's some continuity there. They know what the conditions are, rather than going from Herne Bay to coming to Canterbury thinking, oh, we've got different conditions here, what are the conditions? The conditions that were offered in this application kind of mirrored the conditions that were in the old licence. At that point, when this application went in, the review wasn't pending. And it's only when the review came in, we looked at the condition, well, there were no conditions on the licence. It was then, we need to put some conditions on this licence.
Okay, I'm pleased that you basically agree with my thinking as well, which is it makes sense for the same set of conditions to apply, and for the reasons you're saying, because if staff are going to move from one to another, there's no room for confusion.
And they are more comprehensive and more enforceable, and so yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got a couple of things. It's I just wanted a bit of clarification about the DPS, and because they're going to be at two sites that are geographically apart, not massively apart. I mean, they are only 20 minutes if you're lucky. If you're lucky, it could be 3 hours. So will you have two personal license, people with personal licenses, isn't it, at the Herne Bay store? What is the intention for the Canterbury store? I know because we're not saying that somebody with a personal license has to be on the store all the time, but I'd like to, I mean, you've taken big steps at the Herne Bay store, that similar steps were taken with staff that are likely to be there for some time, you know. I mean, no, we can realise that, you know, somebody is off sick or busy, that you've got, you know, but we do need to have that continuity. your conditions didn't have training in, but the conditions that were set do have training in them. There's also an additional thing about selling single cans and things like that. We did notice at the Herne Bay store this morning that there was a pack with 2 cans missing, which I don't know if somebody had stolen them and you hadn't noticed, because it was right by the door. It was 2 cans of Thatcher cider that was missing from a 4-pack. And whether, or if they're being sold singly, because they shouldn't be sold singly, I think, if they're in a 4-pack, if there's, you know, they were priced as a 4-pack. But also this is a very different type of store. You know, there is an awful lot of street drinkers in the area, and so the selling of single cans we would really want that to just be sort of prohibited as well.
You've got the ABV condition and the obviously the hours as well, and the single can condition are all reflective of the fact. I mean, look, you've been to both stores today. You can see that the Herne Bay store is very much sort of focused on the local community, whereas I think there's a bit more passing trade at the other store. And yes, there's a recognition in the application that there is more of an issue with street drinking in Canterbury than there is in Herne Bay. So yes, yeah, that particular part of it, yeah.
And I think really those 2 conditions were brought over from the other licence as well. Keeping is aware of the problem of street drinking around Canterbury and probably happy to have those on. I think it's safe to say that at the Herne Bay shop there are 3 personal licence holders, not 2, because Keeping is a personal licence holder, obviously, because he's DPS. So Keeping won't be at one shop all the time. He'll float between the 2. That's why it's going to be DPS. But I'll let you answer, because I don't know the answer to it, but I'm assuming that you probably have the staff members. He hasn't got the staff there recruited yet because he's not purchased it yet, but you'd probably put those through a personal licence holders course similar to you've done at Herne Bay. Yeah, so there'll be personal licence holders there as well.
I mean, aside from anything else, having your staff with personal licences has to be better anyway, because they know what they're doing and they've got the qualifications, so it's less likely to end up here. So it makes economic sense to do it anyway. So yeah.
Okay. I think we've kind of finished our questions. So this is an opportunity for responsible authorities to ask any questions. PC Rolf, have you got any questions?
I've got more of sort of like a bit of a overarching kind of presentation sort of information to give, if that's okay, and which then may stem some questions. Obviously, the reason for the objection, obviously, to the grant of the new premise licence for the Canterbury Lane store was obviously following the review application. And just to comment on, obviously, where Michael had said that he'd had a conversation with me after that review, we hadn't had the incident from Kinnear Express at that time to obviously comment. But obviously, it's important that you're aware that obviously the revocation of that licence only took place in February of this year for what was quite a significant underage sale, of the details of which you were aware of, which caused an ambulance, etc. And whilst the actions of that previous owner cannot be held to the fault of the new applicant, police are concerned that relicensing this premises could reignite these issues previously that this store suffered. Obviously, the store's close proximity to the likes of McDonald's, the taxi rank, Dane John Gardens, amongst other retail premises within the city, which obviously do see a large footfall of different demographics, street drinkers, young people. So the police are asking that the committee do consider the suitability overall for this premises to be relicensed. Obviously, today's proven case of an underage sale at the Herne Bay store should be taken into account in respect of this new grant. Obviously, that was agreed that there was an underage sale on the other party's place. And obviously, that's what we were here today to discuss. We still don't have the confidence ourselves in the DPS to run a further premises within the district. And what we would at least like to see is that he can operate his current premises without any failings of the licensing objectives, without any underage sales, and with satisfactory compliance. Therefore, we are asking you as the committee to decide the suitability on the current applicant to operate a further premises within our district. Thank you.
Okay, that was, okay. Are there any other responsible authorities wish to ask questions of the applicant? Mr. Jewell?
No, I don't think so at this time. Thank you.
Ms. Attenborough? Any? Okay. So this was the point where responsible authorities can make their case. I think the police have more or less done that, but have you got anything to add? Okay, Mr. Jewell, have you got anything you wish to add?
I'll be brief. Obviously, the written representations that we sent in prior to the hearing were all based around the suitability of the applicant, taking into consideration the history that we held, and you've already heard earlier today, the history of the complaints we had against the Herne Bay premises. So I think it is just to echo the concerns of Kent Police with regards to the ongoing suitability, bearing in mind the unique nature of this particular store. We know from the history and like the previous incidents that it is a higher pressure area to be working in, and the conditions under the old license reflected the higher standard that was required. So there is just to echo the thoughts of Kent Police as to the suitability to run both premises at the same time. And I know I didn't ask any questions, but obviously it was alluded to a little bit earlier that it was their preference not to have a separate DPS, but obviously to remind you that would be a possibility or an option at your disposal if you felt that was needed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Attenborough, any questions?
No reps were made by myself.
Okay. Right, on the basis of comments made by responsible authorities, I think a question has arisen in my mind that I should have asked at an earlier stage, and it is precisely that. The Canterbury Convenience Store is actually based in a location which my colleague has indicated. There are a number of street drinkers in the area and so on and so forth. But in respect of recent happenings at the Canterbury Convenience Store, which led to a revocation, it's also quite likely the place where a number of underage drinkers have had a history of expectation that they could go there in order to buy alcohol and take to local parks where they drink and consume the alcohol, which was certainly the case that led to nearly a very tragic incident, which led to the revocation of the licence at that store on the last occasion. So my question at this point, and it is a question of Akib and yourself, through yourself, what action will be taken to ensure that the premises licence holder, if we grant this, takes action to ensure that there is a break in the history of underage drinkers going to the shop seeking to buy alcohol? What action will be taken to ensure that that kind of cycle or reputation is broken, so that there's no indication that underage drinkers think it's a place anymore where alcohol can be purchased?
Okay, probably address a couple of things there, really. One, in terms of the DPS, at the moment, the keeper hasn't purchased the store. He hasn't got his staff for the store yet, and he hasn't got a manager for the store. It may be that he appoints a manager, and at that stage, there may be a DPS variation going in. At the minute, there is just a keeper and his family that are buying the store. So that's why keeper's the DPS. We have to name somebody as DPS on there. He's there as DPS. So there may be a variation coming in down the line once a manager has been appointed, settled in, the keeper's happy with them, everything else. To address the underage sales, keeping is very well aware of what happened. We've spoke at length about it, and certainly since the incident at the Herne Bay shop, spoke about it even more. Keepan doesn't want to be here in front of you again, not for Canterbury if it's granted, or for Herne Bay. He said he's not slept all week, thinking he might lose his business in Herne Bay. He spent a considerable amount of money getting Duncan here, not a lot getting me here. He's got his staff trained with a personal licence in Herne Bay. He's prepared to put the staff through their personal licence at Canterbury, and certainly one of the advantages, if they're doing the day course with me, and I know they're his staff, just like I did with Stygians and Ramesh, I do kind of pick on them a little bit and just lay it down a little bit thicker to make sure that they are well aware, because the last thing I want to do is have to come back here and say, well, they failed a test purchase, because I can't give you an excuse why. So I think they know, and I think by the time that the sale actually probably goes through, will now probably be the end of May. The licence was revoked 26th of February. There will be a 3-month period that shop has not sold alcohol. So if the youngsters, and we've gone through a hot period as well, so if there are any youngsters that want to go to the park that have been buying alcohol, they've probably found somewhere else to buy it now. So the break will be a good 3 months before a Keepan's back in there and that shop is selling alcohol again.
Yeah, I agree. 3 month break is useful, but you know what kids are like. They'll go back to somewhere again where they think they might get alcohol. So the question is the degree to which the staff are going to be tough and make sure that kids do not get the reputation that they can buy alcohol at the convenience store.
I'm pretty sure with the investment of purchasing the business and the shop, the lease and everything else, the last thing a Keepan wants to do is to lose that investment. And after going through this process, I'm pretty sure that he'll be fairly hard on all the stuff that they've got to implement. Challenge 25, which we've offered, make sure there are no under sales or no sales of any age restricted products to anybody under 18.
Okay, there aren't any other persons present, so we're moving straight therefore to your right to summarise the application, and then we will we'll retire to consider it.
I don't think you've heard everything I've had to say. I don't think I think I've got the point across. All I'm going to be doing is repeating what I've said. I think you've heard the application and you'll consider it on its own merits. So thank you.
Right, thank you for that.
If I could just add, sorry.
Sorry.
I knew it.
You did indicate earlier on about conditions being the same. If you feel that it's appropriate to, whatever you decided on the first hearing, to put those conditions on this licence, I think that would make the job a lot easier, with the addition of the ABV condition and with the addition of the no singular cans condition as well, given its location for street drinkers, etc.
As well as the issue about the previous owner.
Sorry, yes, and the previous owner, of course.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to retire for 15 minutes and we'll be back. Go. Okay, right. So welcome back. Well, we've considered everything that's been said, both by the applicant and by responsible authorities, and we have come to a decision that we feel, whilst there have been concerns properly raised and so on, we do feel that the applicant has taken great efforts to address those, and we feel content to agree to the application for a premises licence for Canterbury Lane Convenience Store under a set of conditions which certainly include exactly the same conditions as applied to the store in Herne Bay, but with some additional conditions which have been discussed here. And I'm going to ask Peter Key to read out all our reasoning and those conditions in a second. But I want to make this point that for us, one of the things that's been important is that the applicant has certainly made, in our view, some serious efforts to sort out the way in which he manages his stores, and has undertaken to do that. And he has got support of staff, and we consider that that's an approach which we think may well actually work in the Canterbury Convenience Store. But Mr. Key will explain all our reasoning and our conditions in a bit more detail. So, Mr. Key.
Again, there will be a decision letter which sets out more fully the circumstances of this hearing of the Canterbury City Council Licensing Subcommittee, and this being an application under Section 17 of the Licensing Act 2003, decided under Section 18 in respect of Canterbury Lane Convenience Store, for a premises licence, the licensable activity being the retail sale of alcohol between certain hours as set out in the application. The licensing subcommittee have, as at all hearings, considered the legislation, the guidance, when I say guidance, I mean the Section 182 statutory guidance, which was most recently revised in March this year. The Canterbury City Council's own statement of licensing policy, other relevant legislation, all written representations and evidence in the pack, the licensing officer's report and presentation, and all oral submissions and representations made today by and on behalf of all parties at the hearing. There has been no video played. The decision was to grant the licence, but subject to conditions, the same conditions as are imposed on the licence that was considered at the earlier hearing today in respect of the matters that I set out there and dealt with there, and they will be more precisely set out in the decision letter. But there are additional matters. First of all, an additional condition that no beer, cider or lager above 6.5% ABV may be sold. A further condition, no single cans of beer, cider or lager may be sold, only minimum packs of 4 to be sold or displayed for sale. in addition, a condition stating that the premises licence may not be operated or relied on if Mr. Ali Gunn, the previous premises licence holder, is involved with it, the new premises licence, in any capacity whatsoever. Also, the licensing subcommittee considered that the hours on Sunday should be the core hours rather than the hours applied for, which were slightly greater. So that's, I think, 10 a.m. on Sunday to 10:30 p.m. on that day. And as mentioned in the earlier matter, there's a right of appeal that all parties have against this decision under the Act to the magistrates with a strict 21-day time limit. Thank you.
Okay, so that's our decision, and I certainly wish the applicant the best in terms of running both businesses on a sustainable, more secure foundation in the future. So I hope not to see you again. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the responsible authorities, as well as our own officers, licensing officer and legal advisor, and of course our democratic service officer who has kept us online most of the time. Thank you very much. Okay, bye now.